Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Joyce Awards information session for the 2024 awards cycle. My name is Mia Kim, and I'm the Culture Program Director at the Joyce Foundation. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an Asian American woman with long brown hair. I'm wearing a black shirt and sitting in front of a gray background with the Joyce Foundation logo at the top. Thanks so much to Joyce teammates Ella and Maddie, who will be dropping links and info into the chat, and to our closed captioner, Leanne. I invite you to turn on the closed captioning at the bottom of your screens. I'm joining you today from the Joyce Foundation's offices, which are situated on the unceded ancestral homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations. Many other tribes, such as the Miami Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Sac, and Fox, also called this area home, colonially referred to as Chicago. It's my pleasure to be speaking to you today about the Joyce Awards, the Foundation's signature artist commissioning program, and our 2024 cycle. Now, the purpose of today's session is to talk to you about the program and its goals, unpack the application process, and show you how to navigate our online grant system. You'll hear from Polly Morris, Executive Director of Linden Sculpture Garden in Milwaukee, who received a 2021 Joyce Awards with the artist Daniel Minter. Polly will talk about Linden's recently completed Joyce Awards project and share some insights into the experience as well as to the application process. You'll then hear from my Joyce colleague, Lynn Wyora, the Foundation's grants manager, and they'll talk about how to navigate our online application portal. In the last 10 minutes, we'll open it up for Q&A, but if you have questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A box to submit them, and we'll do our best to get through them all. But after the webinar, we'll circulate an email to attendees with links to the webinar recording, as well as to several other links that we'll drop into the chat throughout, and which you can also access our application and guidelines on our website. So to get started, since 2004, the Joyce Awards has supported the creation of new works by pioneering artists of color working in collaboration with organizations and communities in the Great Lakes region. The foundation seeks projects that amplify practices of artists of color while providing communities opportunities to participate in the creation and presentation of new works. The 2024 cycle marks the 20th year of the awards program. And to date, the foundation has awarded $4.4 million for the development of 82 new works of visual, performing, and multidisciplinary arts. In our 2023 cycle, we awarded 5 Joyce Awards of $75,000 each to support collaborative commissions that will take place in Chicago, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Cleveland. Now, our newest grantees were announced in June of this year, and you can read about these projects and see a really great video about them on our website. And Ella will drop into the chat a link to this year's awards announcement. Now, for the 2024 Joyce Awards cycle, which opened last month, I'm thrilled to announce that the foundation will be raising the award amount to $100,000 each. In 2024, we will be looking to make a total of 4 awards. At least $30,000 of this $100,000 grant is required to go directly to the commissioned artist as a stipend. And each grant award is intended to enable the creation and presentation of a new work developed with community participants and partners. There are no restrictions regarding disciplines or media, and past Joyce Award projects have spanned disciplines including dance, theater, music, multimedia, literary, film, photography, installation, augmented reality, and many more. Now, we invite applications from commissioning organizations who have identified a proposed artist or artists to create a new work that can be completed within 12 to 24 months of the project start date. For the 2024 cycle, then, we seek projects that can be completed and presented as early as June 2025, but no later than fall 2026. A quick note that this year we extended the grant duration. It used to be 18 months, but we've learned that these are long-term projects that require sufficient time for incubation, development, stakeholder engagement, and production. So we extended the time to complete the works to up to 24 months. I'm now going to go briefly over some of the goals of the program. The Joyce Awards supports commissions by artists of color that are innovative, high impact, community-centered, and new. We seek to support new work that generates and features intensive community interaction and engagement, which directly informs and shapes the culminating work. We seek projects that are timely and relevant to the place of commission and communities involved. Projects that demonstrates benefits for participants, and projects that are innovative in process, concept, or technique. By new projects, we mean that the major development phase of the work, including significant engagement with communities and participants, happens within the grant period. We're seeking projects that are rooted in and specific to the proposed place or site of commission and communities involved. So two primary goals of the Joyce Awards are to enable artists of color who are at significant inflection points in their careers to stretch themselves artistically and in terms of community engagement, and to provide commissioning organizations resources needed to deepen and expand relationships with communities and partners, particularly communities of color and other underrepresented communities, and involve these communities in the creative process. Now, what's distinguished Joyce Awards projects in the past is how integrated the artistic vision and community engagement pieces are. That is to say, community engagement has not been an add-on or supplement to the project, but work with community has directly informed the artist's thinking and vision and development of the work. A few points about eligibility that I want to underscore. Now, the commissioned artist or artists can reside anywhere in the world, but the commissioning organization and primary activity of the project must be located in and take place within the metropolitan statistical areas of 6 Great Lakes cities. Again, they are Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, Indianapolis, Milwaukee, and Minneapolis, St. Paul. Next, Joyce Award projects are not self-commissions, and proposed artists must be commissioned by an unrelated entity. So the commissioned artist can't be the founder or executive director or leader of the commissioning organization. We have had Joyce Award artists, though, who have prior relationships with the commissioning organization, such as a teaching artist or an artist in residence. Next, there are no restrictions around the number of artists involved in the project. However, historically, the Joyce Awards has not gone to a group of more than 3 artists, but we ultimately seek projects that are innovative, timely, relevant, and community-centered. And if this is best accomplished by a larger group of artists, then that's great. And we ask you in your application to help us understand why. However, please keep in mind that the total funding of the award stays the same regardless of the number of artists involved. Finally, the commissioning organization must be a 501c3 or fiscally sponsored by a 501c3 that's been in existence for at least 1 year. Though most organizations are first-time winners, commissioning organizations can apply an unlimited number of times and can submit up to 2 applications per cycle. Artists can only receive the Joyce Awards once in a lifetime as the commissioned artist. On to the application process. There are 2 main stages in the application process, the letter of inquiry stage and the full application stage. Now, our LOI asks for basic information and answers to 8 narrative questions, and we'll provide a link to a Word document that details all of these questions for you and which you can work on outside of the application portal. Letters of inquiry must be submitted by the commissioning organization and should be developed, though, in collaboration with the commissioned artist. LOIs are due by 11:59 p.m. Central on Monday, September 11th, 2023, via the Joyce's application portal, which my colleague Lynn will dig deeper into later on in our session. If you are a first-time organizational applicant, we ask you to register to access our online grants management system by an earlier deadline, and that deadline is September 6th, 2023. LOIs are reviewed by the foundation internally, and a subset of applicants will be invited to submit full applications and will be notified by October 1st. Then full proposals are due by 11:59 p.m. Central on Monday, October 30th. The full applications are reviewed by an external national panel that includes past Joyce Award winners, both artists and organizational leaders, curators, grant makers, and other arts and culture leaders. The jury will then make recommendations for the awards to the foundation, and if selected to this stage, you'll be asked to have a phone call with the foundation in January 2024 as part of the due diligence process. The foundation then will present to its board for approval the recommended Joyce Awards in April 2024, and awards will be publicly announced in June 2024. Now, this is just an overview slide of the deadlines that I just reviewed, and I've included it here as a reference because we'll be circulating the PowerPoint after our webinar. But I'll move forward to the next slide so we can dig deeper into the LOI questions. So the Joyce Awards LOI again is due September 11th and asks for basic information, including your project title, estimated project budget, duration of project in months, and estimated start date. Your earliest project start date for this cycle should be June 1st, 2024, and the project should be able to be completed within 12 to 24 months of your project start date. The LOI also asks for your proposed artist name, artist website, and the LOI includes 8 narrative questions. 3 of those questions are for the commissioned artist to answer, and 5 are for the commissioning organization. Now, for those of you who have applied for the Joyce Awards in the past, you'll notice we've tweaked some of the application questions. We wanted to give you the opportunity to provide more concrete examples of how you are imagining community engagement fitting into your process, and for artists to give examples of how community engagement has fit into their work to date. Now, the first narrative question asks, what is the initial concept and plan for the artist's commission? We understand that you're proposing projects that are in very early stages of development, but in this question, we're asking you to give an overview of what your project is about, thematically, conceptually, and materially. We're looking for projects that are clearly defined and offer a compelling, distinctive artistic vision while being socially relevant and engaged in the current moment, histories, and/or legacies in the place of commission. By compelling, distinctive artistic vision, this can look like engaging in new thinking, methods, or approaches while being firmly grounded in the history and evolution of an art form and the discourses which surround it. Finally, we're looking for projects that will have a culminating and tangible product. This can take many forms, and it's up to you to clearly define. But in the past, Joyce Award projects have resulted in site-specific public installations, performances, workshops or community events, theatrical productions, public readings or workshops, exhibitions, and more. The next LOI question asks, which communities will this commission engage? Provide 2 examples of how the artist and organization will collaborate with communities in the development and/or presentation of the commission. How might communities benefit from participating in the project? This is one of the most important questions to the LOI. And we ask that when identifying communities to please be specific about who they are, including whether they are defined through a specific location or neighborhood, racial or ethnic identity, gender identity, disability identity, age demographic, and/or socioeconomic demographic. We're looking for projects in which the commissioned artist is actively involved in creating intentional and equitable opportunities for people and partners, your communities, to find their way in and shape the work. We've seen a lot of successful Joyce Award projects over the last 20 years in which the artists engage communities both inside and outside of the arts in a way that participants feel co-ownership of the project. Compelling proposals also engage or are informed by the stories and concerns of the communities involved and can demonstrate or articulate the mutual benefits for participants as much as for the organization and commissioned artist. The most compelling applications have come from organizations that demonstrate the ability to build or deepen trusting and equitable relationships with artists as well as surrounding communities and partners. The next LOI question asks, What prior experience of commissioning artists will the organization draw upon for this collaboration? Now, we welcome applications from both arts, cultural, and community organizations where art may be one part, but not the only part of what you do to advance your mission. But strong applications typically come from organizations that have some experience working with and supporting living artists around the development of new work. We want to understand here how, as a commissioning organization, you've worked with artists or others to execute and develop a vision for a project that involves intense community participation. The fourth question on the LOI asks, if relevant, how does this project build on previous partnerships between the commissioning organization and the artist? Here, both prior and new partnerships between the artist or artists and commissioning organization will be given equal consideration. If this is building on previous partnerships, please explain how this proposed Joyce Award project is facilitating a new stage in that relationship for you and the artist, rather than is simply a continuation of ongoing work. Next, issues of equity are core to the Joyce Foundation's mission and work. So the last question for the organization is, what role does racial equity play in your organizational mission, and how is this demonstrated through your organization's work? We want to understand how racial equity is upheld and practiced and inform your internal and external practices. Most compelling applications have come from organizations that demonstrate this commitment to racial equity in their work across the board. The LOI also includes 3 narrative questions for the commissioned artist, and it's most powerful hearing directly from the artist in first person. The first question for the commissioned artist asks, please describe your creative work and artistic practice to date. How have you engaged communities in your artistic practice thus far? Please give 2 examples. Joyce Awards artists typically have deeply socially engaged practices that not only touch on timely and pressing social, political, and cultural issues, but the artists themselves have deep bench of experience working directly with diverse communities as an important part of their practice. And often there are multiple touch points with community for their work. Compelling Joyce Awards proposals then seek to support the visions of artists of color who center community, and particularly the voices and stories of communities of color and other underrepresented communities in their work. The second question for the artist asks, what interests and/or inspires you about this particular commission? Here, we want to understand why this proposed project is important to you as an artist and why you want to take this journey with this commissioning organization and community in this specific place and at this specific time. The third question for the artist asks, how will this commission allow you to build on, stretch, deepen, or nuance your artistic practice? How will this commission facilitate a step up for you artistically and professionally? The most compelling applications come from collaborations involving artists who are at an inflection point in their careers and for whom the Joyce Awards project will be catalytic and transformative for their careers and their artistic development. Here we want to understand, how is this project going to facilitate a step up for you? Is it about testing new processes, techniques, or ways of working? Is it about scale or medium? Is it about working in new or more sustained and deeper ways with particular communities that you are already connected to or want to engage in a new way? Lastly, at the LOI stage, we ask that you submit an artist bio and artist work samples. We encourage you, if possible, to provide a Word doc with links, which is typically easier for our jury to review and our foundation staff to review. But if that's not possible, you also have the option to upload individual documents or individual stills or other media. We recommend that you think about the work samples as opportunities to show the reader why the artist is interested in this particular commission, how it might connect to past bodies of work, and how it might also be a welcome expansion or departure for the artist. Again, we want to understand the artist's trajectory and how this project fits into that. Now, since we're doing so well on time, I'm going to look at some of the questions that have come in. So one of the questions that has come in, can I apply separately for the Creative Individual Grant if the organization I'm working with and I are also applying for a Creative Organization Grant? Yes, there are no restrictions as to applying for a Joyce Awards. You can apply for both for the Joyce Awards, which is under our Creative Individuals focus area, as at the same time as applying for a Creative Organization Award. Okay. The other question, are there requirements for how well established or how large in terms of annual operating budget or other metric a commissioning organization needs to be? There are no formal requirements for how well established or what the size of your annual operating budget is. And at the same time, as you apply, we want to better understand if you are a smaller organization or even a larger organization, how you will mobilize resources to be able to ensure the successful completion of the project. Oftentimes, we encourage folks in the full application stage when you need to submit an itemized budget to build into your itemized budget appropriate staff time and administrative time to ensure that the project has the resources to be able to be completed. And I can say from past Joyce Awards have gone to commissioning organizations that have ranged in size. Off the bat, I can say that commissioning organizations' budget historically have ranged anywhere from $150,000 upwards of multi-millions of dollars. Okay. Are current Joyce Foundation grantees eligible to apply as a commissioning organization? Yes. If you are a current or former Joyce Foundation grantee, you are still eligible to apply as a commissioning organization. Okay. Now, we will go through the other questions towards the Q&A session. But now I'd like to welcome and introduce Polly Morris, Executive Director of Linden Sculpture Garden in Milwaukee, onto the screen. Hi, Polly.
Hi, Mia.
So Polly, you just wrapped up your Joyce Awards project with Daniel, an artist based in Portland. I know your project was developed over the course of many months and many challenges, including the heights of the pandemic. It was so wonderful being in Milwaukee in June and celebrating the final installation of the sculpture. And you can see some images of that on the screen. But I'm wondering, Polly, if you could tell us briefly about your project and how Linden and Daniel and community members collaborated to create the work. And also, again, if you did want to introduce yourself and say a couple words.
Sure. So I'm Polly Morris. I'm the Executive Director of the Linden Sculpture Garden in Milwaukee. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm an old white woman with my gray hair pinned up, and I wear glasses, and I'm wearing an orange shirt, and I'm sitting in my very messy office, which fortunately is not all that visible on the screen. First of all, I'd like to thank Mia and the Joyce Foundation for inviting me to do this time, and also for the amazing opportunity that the Joyce Award provided for us over the past 2 years. Then I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about why Linden is a somewhat unusual place. I sometimes feel like I have to provide a small glossary so people can understand what I'm talking about. And then I'll talk about the project, and then I'll give a few pointers about applying for the Joyce Award. So to begin with, Linden operates as a laboratory, working with artists, educators, students, and communities to create, support, and share experiences at the intersection of art, nature, and culture. We are intentionally intersectional. Our two main programming initiatives are the Artist-Driven Call and Response, which is a space to support the radical Black imagination and diasporic arts, and the community-driven home, which is a program we run with refugees and other displaced populations. Our place-based K-12 education program includes a long-running teacher professional development program, the Innovative Educators Institute, or IEI, that works durationally with teachers on developing cross-disciplinary curricula, cultivating teacher as artist practices, and working alongside master artists in a summer lab. So these terms, call and response, home, and IEI, come up in our project quite a bit. So nice to lay them out. Our experimental open-ended approach privileges process over product in everything we do and frees us from many of the constraints that, say, a performing arts presenter might face when developing community engaged work, and we're very aware of that. Call and response itself is a community of practice, and it has an established methodology for calling artists in. So first, an artist is proposed by one of the core call and response artists, sometimes more than one. They are discussed. So we started talking about Daniel Minter back in 2018. They are invited for a site visit to meet other call and response artists, to explore potential collaborations with them, to familiarize themselves with the site, which includes the landscape, the sculpture collection, our programs, and to begin to connect with the local community. So Daniel came to us on a site visit in 2019. When artists depart, we ask them to dream about projects that they would not be able to realize elsewhere. And then we begin the long negotiation with reality. As Daniel wrote after his first visit, I leave the gardens full of inspiration and lots to think about. So call and response artists already understand how we work, recognize the value of what we do for artists and with the community, and are attracted by the opportunity to work at Linden. The project had a very long title, In the Healing Language of Trees, a Natural Act of Transformation Restructured for Curing Many Ills. And it was originally, Daniel noticed when he came here in 2019 that all of the emerald ash borer trees, the emerald ash borer had killed about more than 300 trees here at Linden. And he knew that the ash borer was heading for Maine, where he is, and having grown up in rural Georgia, he felt a real affinity for trees, and he felt their pain. Once we started thinking about this project, of course, the pandemic intervened, and the kinds of ills that we began talking about extended beyond the emerald ash borer to things like the pandemic. In his original artist statement, Minter wrote that by sharing space, you make it larger, and this became the organizing mantra for this project. Linden shares space and makes it larger by creating the conditions for thoughtful production, fruitful collaboration, and innovative presentations for artists of color. And our work with Minter over 2 years made us better at all three of those things. It was this that attracted Minter to call and response, the opportunity to create in, quote, a space that calls to each individual, welcomes them home, and asks something of them that only they can give. So we had originally, in our original proposal, we said that Daniel would come in for 2 3-week-long summer residencies, which we realized might be 2 1.5-week residencies each summer. In fact, he came to Linden for 8 residencies. But the first residency was really critical in establishing important relationships with call and response artists, many of whom had come in at that point to be here when he was here, the K-12 educators in the IEI, the Jazzy Jewels, an African-American elder line dancing troupe that we work with in almost all of our projects, our Homeworld Refugee Celebration, where we gather hundreds of refugees from local communities to showcase art, food, music, dance, culture, and also with the Chipstone Foundation, which is the local decorative arts foundation, which happens to be run by someone, John Brown, who is also a carver and had a lot of things that he wanted to share with Daniel. So a lot of the residency time during the various residencies the first summer was dedicated to public-facing, hands-on workshops. There was a day camp with a local Latinx serving organization that we run every summer. Plus, we run our own whittling camp. Daniel was in and out for several of the other home days. And Daniel was able to introduce a kind of sequential and a very inclusive and welcoming process to carving, because carving three-dimensional beads is quite difficult. So he would start with, helping people design visual symbols that could be turned into narratives, and then they would carve rubber stamps. And then if they were able to, they could move on to cutting woodcuts. And then for the smaller group who were really able to, they could begin to work on three-dimensional beads. And across the 3 years, people came into the project at that earliest level and worked as far as they could along the path towards being involved in the project. So we had lots of openings, and it was not just limited to people who could master three-dimensional carving. We also wanted to exhibit Daniel's existing work from the beginning of the project. So we installed an exhibition of his work in that first summer. It served as a reference for his activities, a site for gallery talks, an introduction to his use of visual narrative and of vernacular arts like carving. That exhibition, I have to say, had a profound impact on Black visitors, and it had the greatest word of mouth participation we had ever experienced here. People would come to our front desk and ask to borrow chairs so that they could sit in the gallery in front of each piece one at a time and spend time with it. The elements that were so compelling were Daniel's storytelling, his references to African-American history, and to his rural life, which was very familiar to some of our older participants here who came north during the Great Migration, or their families did. So people felt very, very connected to that work. We always knew that one of the biggest challenges was going to be keeping the project alive when Daniel wasn't here physically. So we had planned all kinds of things. In addition to the exhibition, there were cultural plant walks led by a local artist in residence who's also an indigenous herbalist. We talked about ash borer a lot in our public tree walks. We continued the whittlers group of teenagers throughout the winter, and they'd get together every month and whittle and work on beads for Daniel's project. We assembled different groups of participants to make some of the pouches that you see in that tree. We employed one of the refugees we work with to make the white coats that appeared in the final workshops. We also had simultaneous call and response projects. Ariane King-Comer, who's another call and response artist, was busy working with refugee women here, and this was being done mostly over Zoom because of the pandemic, designing wearable garments that had carried personal and cultural symbols of healing. And Daniel, in the end, ended up making a healing coat for that as well. But interestingly, a great deal of our work during that first intervening year was with the IEI teachers, with Daniel coming in virtually to classrooms and Linden staff on the ground supporting teachers. MPS the public schools here remained closed for a very, very, very long time during COVID. So in the 2021-22 school year, they were just getting back to school. They were not allowing strangers into buildings. They were not allowing kids to go on field trips. So in some ways, we benefited from the kind of habitual use of Zoom. And over the course of that first school year, we worked in 19 different classrooms with 6 IEI educators, providing multiple services for over 400 students. The most ambitious project took place at Bruce Guadalupe Community School, where the art educator led her entire 8th grade cohort, 125 students, I think, through a year-long project with Minter that culminated in the production of beads for his sculpture. We made hundreds of carving kits, both rubber carving and wood carving kits, and would deliver them to the schools for the many weeks of their residencies. That was one of the main ways we kept the project going in Daniel's absence. Daniel would come in at the beginning of each residency, talk about his work, demonstrate wood carving. And then the teachers who had been writing cross-disciplinary curriculum during the summer in the IEI would implement that curriculum with other teachers because of the Ash Borer. There are a lot of science connections, also English language arts, religion, several cross-disciplinary directions, and with significant student input in deciding how they would make use of the things they were learning from Daniel. And then Daniel would come in at the end to see via Zoom to see the work the students had done. In the second summer, the focus was more on Daniel's production, his carving, cultivating call and response relationships, and planning the culminating events. So Daniel was in and out carving here at Linden. He would come in for some significant events like the opening of the Healing Coats exhibition, the performance of Reggie Wilson's Power, because a lot of the community members who worked with Reggie also worked with Daniel, and then for a power symposium that gathered call and response artists and other interlocutors to talk about Reggie's work. He invited, yeah.
Could I interrupt you? I want to make sure that we have enough time to talk a little bit about maybe if you want to wrap up your thoughts in the next minute, and then maybe any advice that you'd have for folks who are thinking online.
Yeah, I will zip this through because it is very long. So we ended up, ending it this past June with a series of culminating workshops, a procession, the installation of the final sculpture, and also a birdhouse that Daniel had made in response to another call and response artist project here. And then we did a symposium or informal conversation the following day with participants and call and response artists. Just to finish up the thought about that project, I love the picture Mia picked for the slide on the right because it shows Ban, a Lao refugee we work with a lot, who's wearing a healing coat that was made by Hasina, a Rohingya refugee who's a member of our home steering committee. The image on the back of that coat is a screen print of a batik painting made by call and response artist Arian King Comer from a screen capture of Hasina's husband's village in Myanmar. And Ban also worked on the pouches at the top of the tree with the jazzy jewels who were there at the culmination too. I have a few pointers. So the first is about product. The hardest thing about putting a proposal like this together for us is conveying what we want to accomplish without saddling ourselves with an overly defined product, especially a product that will not emerge for 2 or 3 years, given the application cycle and the length of the project. And Daniel and I often discuss how difficult it was to talk about the project in a coherent way while it was going on. And this is from Daniel. I didn't want to talk about what the work was going to be. I wanted to talk about the journey in a way that people would understand where we're going. So it was hard to see the Joyce language shifting away from tangible product to culminating product or process. Preparation from the Joyce point of view, you have to demonstrate that you've talked enough with the artist to agree on the project and your respective roles and responsibilities within the project, but a lot lies beneath the tip of that iceberg, I think, as I've demonstrated in how we came to this project. We don't rush into thinking that a project will emerge. We sat out a lot of Joyce cycles until we felt that a project had ripened sufficiently and aligned with a Joyce deadline. So this might not be your year. I would be very specific about describing existing durational relationships with individuals and communities, and I would be specific about the organizational structures you've created to integrate these voices into your programming. And I think you need to show that the talking and listening and responding that you did while planning the project is a regular part of your practice and will continue once the project is underway. And then I think you have to demonstrate that you and the artists have come up with a mode of production and physical engagement that works for both of you, and that you're both willing to adjust as you move forward. So, in our case, those episodic residencies became more frequent and more episodic. And, we do spend a lot of time listening to artists here, and I could go on about that for hours, but I won't. And finally, the project period, we were in the 18-month cohort, and we got a generous 6-month extension, which was perfect for us. But also keep in mind that in the 3-year window, when you're applying and executing that a great deal can happen on both sides of the equation with the organization and the artist, whether it's COVID or, in the case of Daniel Minter, he became extremely busy with his own and his organization's projects at a certain point in all of this. So be prepared for change.
Thank you so much, Polly. And I
Sure.
love how you talked about, obviously the challenges of applying at a stage of the project that is so early on. And I think that the focus on articulating what your process will look like and what the structure of that engagement will look like is one way to, is one strategy to focus on in terms of what you do want to, or what you can anticipate. I want to, so thank you again. I hope all of you will join me in thanking Polly. It was again so wonderful seeing the relationship. I know that this is a relationship between you and Daniel that will continue and that Linden is committed to. And so that is one of the most rewarding outcomes that we see from the Joyce Awards, is that this is really either the start or a deepening of a relationship that extends beyond the life of the awards. So
Thank
now
you.
I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Lynn Wyora, our grants manager, who will take us through a few things about using our online grants management system called Flux.
Thanks, Mia. As Mia said, my name is Lynn. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a white non-binary person in my mid-40s. I have short curly hair and glasses. So the process for the Joyce Awards, Mia kind of went through pieces of it. We like to think that it has 4 parts. And all of those parts happen in our grants management system, which we'll refer to as a grant portal called Flux. The first step is, if you are not already someone who has access to Flux, if you don't already submit grant reports or regularly apply, you're going to need to register. As Mia said, that deadline's a little earlier so that we can get you in and get you all set up so you can actually begin the application process itself. The second step would be, once you log into the system, you'll fill out the questions and upload a few documents for the letter of inquiry. And then third, if you are invited to submit a full application or proposal, you'll go back in, add some additional responses and some additional documentation and submit that as well. After that process, we have a jury review the applications, and that's sort of the entirety of the process that you'll see in Flux. Thank you, Maddie. And so when you go to our grant portal, this is what you'll be presented with. If you are unsure if you have a login, if you think you've logged in the past or you want to see, you can click on the reset or create password link on the left. Check your spam folder, but if you don't get an email and reply, then you do not have an account with us that's currently active. Obviously, you can just go ahead and log in if you do have an active login. And then if you know for sure you've never applied for the Joyce Awards before or for any Joyce Foundation grant, we have a link on the bottom right that says create an account now. Depending on your screen size and everything, you might need to scroll down a bit, but that button will be on the bottom right. And then you'll just fill out a registration form. It's very basic information. The top will be sort of information about the person who is going to be logging into the system. So whoever is filling out the form is probably that contact person. That person will always be kind of notified automatically by the system when something has been submitted or you've been invited. So make sure that's an email that someone checks and is monitoring regularly. And then you will also fill out information on your organization as well. There are a few questions about the project. For the Joyce Awards, what we're going to ask you to do is, in the question on top where it says, were you invited to apply by a Joyce staff member? Just say no. We don't really use that for the Joyce Awards. The second question, we are going to ask you to reply culture-Joyce Awards. It's a drop-down menu. That'll help us route everything quickly. We don't do the same type of screening process for Joyce Awards registrations that we do for the rest of our program areas. So we just want, if you put that, we'll know that we should go ahead and let you through right away. And then there's a question below that that asks for details on your project. Feel free to just put Joyce Awards. You don't have to go in depth because this isn't the application itself. And then once you have your login, or if you already have one and you've logged in, this is what the grant portal will look like when you first get into it. You'll notice on the bottom left, there is a blue Submit LOI button. Please don't click on that one. That's actually for our regular grant making. And so you'll see a very different application that is not the same as the one you're going to see everywhere else. So you should not click on that. However, if you scroll down, and Maddie, you can go to the next slide, you will see a section of a bit further down that says submit an LOI for the Joyce Awards. That has a link kind of to general information, but that green button is going to be what you want to click on. And that will open up a new application that you can start filling out for your organization. And that will give you the correct questions and require the correct documentation. And then the last thing I want to mention, and Maddie, I think you can go to the next slide, is we understand like everyone has different sort of capacity and levels of familiarity with these things. So feel free, if you have questions about the system, never hesitate to reach out to us. Myself and we have a grants associate are more than happy to troubleshoot with you. So we just want to make sure everyone knows that they can go ahead and ask any question to us. We're here. So.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I'm coming back on screen. Okay. So we're here to help you and support you through the application process. And I want to, again, just thank Polly and maybe turn it over now to our Q&A. So on the screen, first thing I just want to say is you'll see some email addresses to contact for help. But you'll also see some important links, including a link to the online grants portal, which is where you can start an application, or if you are a first-time organizational applicant, register for an account on Flux. You can find a link to, and my colleague Ella will drop into the chat all of these links. I will also be holding office hours throughout the next month. And you can book a 20-minute time slot to speak with me if you have a project idea or if you have any other follow-up questions regarding eligibility and guidelines. Of course, you could always email us either at joyceawards@joycefoundation.org or applications@joycefoundation.org. But if you'd like to have a deeper conversation before you submit your LOI, I encourage you to sign up for a slot. Now, I think that we'll just go through the questions one by one. So one of the questions that came up that I'm going to return to, are current Joyce Foundation grantees eligible to apply as a commissioning organization? Yes, if you are a current or former Joyce Foundation grantee, you are still eligible to apply. The only caveat is if you are a previous Joyce Awards artist recipient, that there is a limitation of 1 Joyce Awards in a lifetime for an artist. If you have received the Joyce Awards as a commissioning organization, though, you are eligible to apply for an unlimited number of times. Now, a question here was looking at let's see, how to define, a question around how we define new work. And by defining new work, these are obviously long-term projects. And by saying new work, what we mean is that the majority of the community engagement work and development of the project itself not have occurred prior to your project start date. We understand that these are large investments on behalf of artists, on behalf of your organization and communities. So we anticipate that there is some early stage project development that happens, whether that's piloting, whether that's a workshop. And so we understand that there is some work that necessarily will happen before your project start date. So there is some flexibility around that, but the way that we like to see it is that really the core development work, and which is really focused on your work with community, is happening through within the grant period itself. Now, the other question is, let's see. Can the artist be the head of a group? For example, a dance team, drill team, band. What are the requirements for the head of the group and members of the group? So the artist can certainly be a head of a group. The commissioning organization, though, needs to be an unrelated entity. And so again, I want to say that historically, the Joyce Awards has not gone to a group of artists that's more than 3, but we don't have any restrictions around the maximum number of artists allowed. At the core of this, what we're really trying to get at is to encourage collaborations between an artist or group of artists as well and an organization. And so this is why we like to describe the Joyce Awards as not being self-commissioned. Let's see. So this goes back to, it seems to be a similar question across the board. Does the commissioned artist need to be an individual artist or could be an ensemble that is a registered 501c3? Again, this goes back to no self-commissions. And if this is a ensemble, we asked in your application, or we asked that the commissioning organization be an unrelated entity, and to really help us understand why this project and the goals of these projects is best achieved through an ensemble versus through a smaller group of artists. So another question is, my organization has commissioned the artist in the past. Can we apply to Joyce to commission a new work? Yep, as Polly mentioned, a lot of times with Joyce Awards, there is a relationship between the commissioning organization and the artist that pre-exists the Joyce Awards. And so you can certainly apply to commission this artist who you have a relationship with to create a new project. Okay, let's see if. Is preference given to works in large cities? So the geographical restrictions or eligibility is really defined by these 6 Joyce Award cities that we described. And our geographical boundaries, again, are the metropolitan, if your core of your work and your organization is located in the metropolitan statistical areas of one of these 6 Joyce Award cities. We have projects though, for instance, a project this year at Franconia Sculpture Garden. And that's a project that's located still within the metropolitan statistical area of Minneapolis-St. Paul, but it is more within a rural area. And that's certainly a really interesting project and one that the jury was very excited about. And so I would say that there is no preference given to whether you are how urban or rural your project is. And again, it really is about who you want to work with and why is that relationship and that potential community engagement and creative process going to be important for the communities that you work with, why it will be important to you as an organization, and why it will be important to your commissioned artist. When identifying an artist at an inflection point, are there indicators for when the artist might be too advanced in their career or too early in the career? So we deliberately don't use the terms early career, mid-career, or late career to define what the appropriate, who we're targeting or who appropriate Joyce Award artist might be. Because what we're really trying to better understand is how the nature of your proposed project will stretch them artistically and in terms of community engagement, and how it will offer a new point of growth for them. And we believe that this can happen all along the scope or span and trajectory of an artist's career. The other consideration that I will say is that this is one of the goals of the awards program is to increase the visibility of artists of color in the Great Lakes. And so we will one thing that is taken into consideration in terms of thinking about an inflection point and thinking about which artists can really benefit from a Joyce Awards is not just the connection to the project, but how the visibility of the Joyce Awards might also help propel them. Okay. Lynn, are you looking at the questions in case there's anything that is Flux related?
Yeah, I think they're actually all for you.
Awesome. Okay. So one person asked, this is kind of a question again around whether, like, what is the definition of new work? And if a project is too far advanced in the project development to qualify for the Joyce Awards. And these are such case by case scenarios. And so I would encourage you again to reach out to me and or book a time with me on Calendly so we can discuss the specifics of the project. But really, you know, again, we've given Joyce Awards in the past to projects that have been piloted or where there's been an initial workshop. But really, again, the core of the work that we're hoping to support with the Joyce Awards is the development that is really about these series of engagements and interactions between the artist, the organization, and the community members involved. Let's see. We have about a couple minutes left, so if folks have any final questions that they want to put on. So is it possible to apply as a joint organization? So for instance, two arts organizations creating a new work together. This is a great question. So technically, the application must come from one lead commissioning organization. But I should say that the vast majority of Joyce Awards projects involve not just community participants, but what we mean by this too is community partners. And many of these can be other arts organizations or community organizations. And in fact, in the full application stage, we ask you to list who your prospective and confirmed partners are who will help you carry out the project. Okay. So we have, does the commissioning organization need to be an arts-based organization? I just want to go over this question because we welcome applications for a range of organizations, and Joyce Awards have gone to community organizations in which the arts and artistic and creative work is one part, but not the entirety of what this organization does to support, to advance its mission. The question, though, in the LOI that asks about what your past experience is working with artists and especially around new commissions is that we want to better understand what body of experience you'll be drawing on to really ensure that the artist feels supported in this process and that gives the jury confidence that this project will be able to move forward in the way envisioned by both parties, the artist and the organization. Okay. So let's see. So again, I just want to say fiscal sponsors, you can use a fiscal sponsor if you are not a 501c3. But your fiscal sponsor, again, and this is something that it is a mechanism to be able to work, be eligible if you are not a 501c3, but we also encourage you to take into serious consideration the idea that the Joyce Awards is really not intended for self-commissions. So another question is, can I still apply even though I work at the organization I am applying with? This is a great question. So this person asks if they are not a co-founder or they're not an executive leader. And we certainly have had Joyce Award artists who are teaching artists, for instance, and employed by that organization. And so they have a prior relationship. But again, this is, but they are not a co-founder or executive arts leader. So on the one final question that I'll go to is just on about the requirements for audited financial statements. So if you make it to the full, if you are invited to the full application stage, in many smaller organizations are not required legally to submit audited financial statements, and that's okay. You can just submit a Word document that says that you have not produced an audited or not required to produce an audited financial statement. and that is completely sufficient. So I want to be mindful of everyone's time and also say that I know we have not been able to get to all of the questions. We will do our best to, in our follow-up email, answer some of these questions. And also, I encourage you to reach out to the email addresses that are listed in the chat box specifically, because I think that that will be the fastest way, now that I think about it, to be able to answer your questions. There are a lot, and so we will follow up with an email with a recording, links, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint deck. Okay, well, thank you all so much again. Thank you to Lynn, thank you to Polly, who had to jump off, and thank you to Ella, Maddie, and our captioner, Leanne.